Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Niamh Cassidy, and I am very excited today to be joined by Aoife Lennon. So Aoife is a perinatal educator, IBCLC, and describes herself as a full-time challenger of the polite nonsense that surrounds birth and breastfeeding, which I absolutely love. She runs Bumps Bainne, where she helps parents prepare for birth, feed their babies with confidence, and reclaim trust in their own bodies in a world that doesn't always allow them to do that. Aoife is also one of our Birth Biz besties as well. So Aoife, very welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you on. So I think you are one of the first clients that I've had on, and we're going to do a lot more of these conversations of your business and just we'll just see where it goes. So welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on.
You are very welcome. So let's start with what you were doing before you became self-employed, and then maybe what the journey was to get you started in this work.
Yeah, so when I finished school, I went off and became a home ec teacher. So I went to Sligo for 4 years and did all of that fun. And I worked for almost 20 years as a home ec teacher up in Monaghan Town. I'm also an Irish speaker, so that's where the Bainne comes from. And yeah, I love working with teenagers. I think that they are amazing. I really do. And I think it's because they don't care what other people think on the outside. And then they care deeply about it on the inside. You know, having that kind of awareness around their development and feelings and being able to hold space for that. I just think it's fantastic. And I loved teaching them.
Absolutely. I loved working with teenagers and young people as well. So when a lot
Yeah,
of my work in homeless services was with that age group, and they're definitely some of my favorite people.
absolutely. And, you know, they're really just coming into their own, a little bit like mothers.
Yeah.
So I had my first little boy in 2017. And to say that the shit hit the fan would be the understatement of my life. I was terrified. I was absolutely petrified of going into labor. Think I talked myself out of it.
Yeah.
Because I got to 42 weeks and not so much as a sniff of labor was there. And I did a hypnobirthing course because I did think, you know, I was like, I know myself, I'm an anxious person. You know, something like this would be really good. And I really wanted to go into labor myself. I did not want to be induced, but I also didn't want to go into labor full stop. So I ended up being induced, went through the full suite of induction, a very long, tough labor, really wasn't prepared for what an induction was going to entail. Just assumed it was, you know, they're going to kickstart labor, but it'll be the same kind of labor.
Because it's considered very normal. You know, so many people are induced. In particular here in Ireland, we have a really high induction rate. And it seems like it's just something that happens and it's just a way to get labor started, and then sure, everything's the same after that. So that reality
Exactly.
can hit really hard.
Yeah. And look, he came earthside, kicking and screaming, but there was a massive PPH, so a postpartum hemorrhage. There was a retained placenta. So I ended up having to go to surgery and I was separated from him. And just before all of that, shoulder dystocia. So it was like birth bingo, not the fun kind.
Definitely. So how did that impact your journey to go from home ec teacher to where you are now?
So it impacted my journey massively because then, like, the breastfeeding side of things was no easier. But I went to my local Quidju group. So Quidju is a voluntary organization. There are breastfeeding counselors. They are the most amazing people. They really are. And I know I count both of us amongst those amazing people. But after I had my second son, they suggested to me that I become a breastfeeding counselor. And I thought, wow, like, you actually think I could be that person for other people? And I was just so honored to have been asked to consider it. So I was like, absolutely, yes. So I'd say I hadn't done the introductory day and I thought, no, I want to do this. I want this to be more than just something I do for an hour a week. I want to be in this life. So I finished my BFC training, and then was at the Quid U conference, and Gemma, you know Gemma yourself as well, told me that she thought that, we just got chatting, and she was like, you should absolutely do the antenatal teacher training. You'd be great at it. And she really sold it. And it was like, you need to talk to Mim or maybe Sarah or Niamh. So off I went and spoke to all three. And yeah, I was in the next intake for that while I was also working towards doing the IBLCE. And I just feel like I found my people, myself in all of that.
So, did you go back to work as a primary school teacher or as a secondary school teacher, or did you stay off? Did you not go back after maternity leave that time?
No, I went back full time both times. I am notorious for taking on too much, doing too much, wanting to do more than time allows for. But I'm crazily determined, stubborn, bit of, if I want to do something, I'm going to do something. And these are the things I would give out about in other people as well, my own children included.
So at what stage did you get to the point where you decided, you were going to fully move your career over?
At school one time. This actually is really, really random. Well, it's not that random, but during COVID, a student passed away by suicide. Not a student that I had really a whole pile to do with. But it really affected me. I was like, wow, we get one shot at this thing called life, and we get to do as much as we possibly can in that one life. And a friend of mine, another teacher, said to me one day, she says, what's the three most important things in your life? And I said, my family, my friends, and my health. And she said, is that how you live your life? And I was like, no. And these two things both kind of compounded. And I was like, no, that's it. Everything's shifting. Everything's changing. And I really started working on my mindset around, living the life that I wanted and the life that my family needed us to have. And that kind of kick-started I'm going to take some time out of this career and do something else. And that is exactly what I started to do. Then that coincided then with me starting the antenatal training and everything else. And I thought, yeah, I'm just going to move my priorities, and it's almost like the stars all aligned, because my children need me so much actually at the moment, and lots of other things around, their educational needs and their emotional and social needs have kind of come up in the last couple of years. And it's just such a privilege to be able to be around for them a little bit more, make my career work around their needs, supporting their needs. So I'm currently technically still a teacher, but on a career break.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them just the other night, I said, boys, I've applied for another career break. You know, the way mommy drops you to school every day, and they're like, yay! And one of them jumped on top of me and, Mom, what if they say no? And I said, well, if they say no, I'll just tell them I'm not coming back at all. Like, ever. And the other fellow was like, no, you need to write them a letter and you need to tell them that this is what you do because you're a mommy and this is what mommies do. And like, it's made such a huge difference. It's made a massive difference to who I am personally, and then to who I am as a mom as well with them. And being your own boss, like, don't get me wrong, it is hard work because you are always on, bit like being a mom, but it's in a way that fills me up so much and has allowed me to develop as a person so much more.
Yeah. And what's coming up for me as you're kind of saying this? One is that I see a lot of my own journey in what you've been through now. I didn't have that kind of epiphany that I need to make a change. It was more of a logical, gradual change, but there was a lot of the same decision making process around when my eldest started school and trying to manage the after school and the pickups and the summer holidays and the challenges that he was having with all that. We're having to go to all these places and different things, that it was a really big family decision for us as well to change all of that. The other thing is while working for ourselves can be challenging, as we all know, what it does allow you to do is it allows you to pick your priorities. Whereas sometimes when we're employed by other people, we don't always get to choose our priorities.
Yeah, that's actually so true because no matter how much you want to say, okay, well, I'm going to prioritize my family, my health, my friendships, the reality is that when you're being paid to do a job that you have to prioritize that. Whereas when you are working for yourself, you can prioritize those other things whilst also making the job be the job that it needs to be for you.
Yeah. And what was that decision making process like for you to apply for that career break and to take the hit and not getting paid by an employer? What was that like, and where has that led you since then?
It was terrifying. And it was about this time of year, so you're just after Christmas, everyone's poor anyway. And I was like, this is a massive jump. But I was actually so excited. And I spoke about it for the whole year beforehand. I was like, I'm going to be applying for a career break. And I was really, so excited about it. So it was like, feel the fear, but do it anyway, because one way or another, we're not going to starve. If it came to it, I would go in and sub 5 days a week somewhere. So I suppose I was lucky in that I had that kind of cushion. And I actually do a couple of days of learning support here and there now as well, because I really missed actually the teenagers. And they are great. And there are certain insights that you get from them that you can apply to the work, the birth work, and vice versa, and it's great for them to see. And this is what I would say is, as a teacher, you are a role model, and they have seen somebody who they consider to be, a fierce female, because I'm all of that. But they have seen her go out and get what she wants and be that person for her family. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually what I want those kids to see as well. I want them to see that, and particularly the girls, that as they become women, that this is what a woman can do. And for the boys to see that this is what a woman can do too. This is what, in a world of so much toxic masculinity,
Mm,
that you can go in there and be a boss bitch in a different way.
absolutely. And so, what
Yeah.
has it been like, kind of building that business from scratch? What have the challenges been? What has helped you along the way? Where are you now?
Okay. So I am a grafter. I won't lie. Like, I do the work. And I love it. And but it has been hard and it has been slow, and it has been slower maybe than I had hoped it would be, but it is growing and it is getting there. And the mindset work that I've done as part of being in the Birth Biz Besties has been a real game changer, like charging what you're worth, knowing your own worth, and being able to talk about that in a way that sits okay with your own values. Um, and being part of that village of other women who are not only, trying to do that have the same kind of goals as you, but who lift you up, who push you on, who support you. They carry you at your low moments, and they clap their hands and cheer for you at your highest. It's everything that a woman should have had when she had her children. I talk constantly about, if there's two things I talk about, it's neuroscience and the village. And the village for me started with Quidju.
Mhm.
And it has, like, you don't just have one village as you go into motherhood and businesshood and all the other hoods. I have my Gaelic for Mothers and Others village. And like, I couldn't kick myself out of a wet paper bag, but those women fill me up in a way that, and again, cheer me on, carry me at my low moments, all the things that a village should do. And that village that we talk about, that's required to raise a baby or really to do anything, does. So like I say, it started with Quidju. It went on in different friends that I had. And then as other kind of older friends had their babies and their experiences. Those little villages formed. And it's now, like I say, the birth biz village. The villages are so many, but it is the most essential part, I think, of success and achievement. Um, I've just started reading Manifest Like a Mother. Have you read it?
I have read that one, yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like this woman she just aligns with my values so much right now. So I'm like really leaning into that. And I'm like, uh, like I read The Secret years ago and I was a bit like, yeah. And sometimes it can be hard to make sense of that. You think of some of the things that are happening in the world and you think those people did not manifest that into their lives. But at the same time, I'm a massive believer in serendipity. So it's, but yeah, so I'm really leaning into that now. Manifesting, I'm going to be a success and I'm already success. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so thankful for everyone around me who's helping me to become that.
I think you touched on really important things there, in particular this idea of the village and the support that we need in life. We would both, having come from that Gridger background, be proponents of that idea that parents need support to be parents, to be families, to raise their little babies. I was only having this discussion with a breastfeeding client yesterday. The two of them, they live local to me, but they're not from here, and we were talking about the importance of kind of building those networks and getting her to our Quidju group. And we need, as human beings, we are socially and anthropologically deviated, brought towards being in community, and being in community is such a part of everything that we do, and it's just so important for our success in every area of our lives. As you mentioned, that we're a together species. Even though we're seeing huge rises of individualism and through capitalism and all the other things that bring that up, the reality is the human race thrives through community and through cooperation. And when we get back to that point, we will see the world being a better place again. But in our own little circles, before I get too much into it, in our own little circles, we need to continue to foster that community and to build it up. And that is what raises all boats.
Yeah, it really is. Like, you can look at other birth workers, and this is something you'll have spoken about probably on this podcast hundreds of times, probably. But when you start to look at other people as collaborators rather than competition, everything just changes and people help one another along rather and help everyone. Like you say, it helps all boats to rise with the tide rather than just one.
What would you think has been kind of the biggest challenge that you have overcome so far?
So I kind of had a little epiphany there during the Christmas around, when you look at your followers on, say, Instagram, and you see like that so many people like stopped following you on a day. And I was like, that really bothered me. And it always really bothers me. And you see a little dip in the followers, you're like, why did they unfollow me? What have I done to upset them? And maybe they've just moved out of that season of their life where what I'm saying is relevant. But this was my thing, is that my message is not going to land with everyone. It's not. And that's okay. And it's just, that's been, I suppose, my latest shift in mindset. Is that it's okay for everyone doesn't have to like me. Everyone doesn't have to need or want my services. Some people are absolutely happy to be in blissful ignorance when it comes to things around birth and breastfeeding and postpartum. And that's fine. And there's a place for those people too. I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea or a glass of wine. But for the people who I am, that my content, I suppose, is more directed at, and my classes are directed at, and they're the people who I want, the people who can see my value.
And they're the people who will benefit most from your support as well. So I'm one of those people. I'm Marmite. You know what I mean? Either like me or you don't, and that's fine. And it is a hard thing to take in because we do have an innate desire to be liked because, again, sociologically it means that we're more likely to be more successful as a human if we're liked. But in modern society, we know that we don't need to be liked by everyone to survive. So it is something that we can kind of say, well, okay, that's okay. They weren't my people. They're not my people.
Exactly. And you can't be everyone's favorite, and because then you're not yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And funny, I was out for dinner with my sister at the weekend, and she says to me, don't be offended by this. Ruth is very black and white. Like, everything is just as it is. I'm just going to tell you this like it is now. I definitely prefer who you've become on social media than who you were when you started out. You were just a little bit too sweet for me. No, wouldn't have been able for that. And I was like, well, thank you, I think.
That is definitely a compliment.
I said, yeah, I'm trying to kind of lean a little bit more into my, I hate this phrase because everyone teases me for using it, but my authentic self. I am trying to be my authentic self more, who is a feisty person, who is fierce, who is wildly feminist, and also likes things like nails and hair and, makeup. And I can do all of those things. I can be all of those things because that's who I am.
Yeah, and
I like that.
I think
It won't
everyone
hit home for everyone, but
I think a lot of
it'll
people
help
will
for the
go
people who
through a
count.
similar. I think a lot of people go through a similar journey of the when you start out on social media and you start putting yourself out there of kind of behaving in the way you think people want you to be. So you're acting in a way that you think the character that you've created in your head of this birth worker is supposed to be. And it is great to see people get more comfortable and become more of themselves. I know even like in the earlier episodes of this podcast, when I listen back and I'm like, oh, that content was good, but the way I delivered it wasn't really me. And it is becoming more comfortable in our own skin in all of those things. And it has been lovely to see your journey of your personality kind of coming out online, as well as, obviously what you give to your clients, because you're giving that to them in real life anyway. So you may as well show it to them online first.
Yeah, like as I said, there's no way I would have recorded a reel of myself packing the car in me dressing gown like I did the other day when I first started out. Like today I definitely did blow dry my fringe and put on a bit of makeup, but that was a for me thing. That's a dress to impress kind of, but for myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I think I record more content in my pajamas than I do in my clothes, because that's usually when I have time or the space for my brain to be able to think about
Yeah,
things or hiding
definitely.
away in the bedroom. If you had any advice for someone who is maybe at that stage where you were a couple of years ago, working full time, but still, maybe is in the middle of their training or has completed their training in some area of birth work and would really like to make this their thing. Is there any advice that you would give somebody?
Start planning it. It's not something that you can do overnight, but start to plan it and identify the supports that you have. There's no way, and I do mean this hand on heart, like I am incredibly lucky with my husband, as all people who are married to a spouse should be. I am incredibly lucky. Like Rory talks me down off a ledge at least once a month, where I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? I've left this permanent pensionable job with 3 months off every summer. And he's like, first of all, you haven't left it. It's still there if you want it. Second of all, you are rocking this. You're just going through a rocky spot. We are not on the breadline. We're not living off baked beans. Everything is fine. You can do this. And having someone in your corner who doesn't just nod along, but, really kind of champions it. And it can be anyone. He is, and I probably don't tell him this myself often enough, but he is amazing in that way. But identify those people, and also identify the people who might inadvertently be a little bit toxic. They're quite often people who you wouldn't identify as being toxic, but people who might, kind of plant little seeds of doubt. Saboteurs. Identify the saboteurs. Count yourself amongst them, you know, because You can't get rid of a lot of these people are people like family members.
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily people that you can just like be like, right, cut them out. So identify your supports and your saboteurs. Start planning for it financially, emotionally, and also in terms of like the practicalities. What is that life going to start looking like? And give yourself the time to do all of that. Like there isn't a set amount of time. For some people, that could be over the course of a few weeks, maybe. For me, it took probably about 2 years to really get to that point. And I actually remember going in and saying to my then principal, I'm just telling you, like I had been toying with the idea of doing a PhD. And then I just went and I said, do you know what? I'm actually going to just step away from this for a little while, but I'm not going to do it for a couple of years. And it also meant that I knew that he was then preparing for the school adjustment
Yeah,
of my
yeah,
loss,
you've not been there.
which wasn't my, it wasn't my responsibility, but I feel very responsible towards my students. Like I really, really love my students. They're after my own children. They're pretty important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew, and it meant I could, be like, I think that this would be a good person for us to bring in. And I I have a past pupil in teaching all of my students, somebody who, decided to follow in my footsteps. Some of the things she has said to me over the past few years while she's been working there have been just so lovely, about what a strong woman I am and what a role model I am. It's just, yeah.
That is so sweet. And I think that's great advice around kind of the planning, but through all aspects, the emotional, the financial, the physical, the practical, to start being able to think about things. Because as much as we want to follow our hearts, so much life is a reality, and we do need to mind all of those things. And it makes making the step easier when we at least have some of our ducks in a row. You know what I mean? Everything doesn't have to be perfect, as it wasn't for yourselves. You know what I mean? You figured it out as you went along, but having a bit of space to say, well, how can I make this work? And looking at it from that point of view of how can I make it work, not how will it not work out.
Yeah, exactly.
And also the idea of,
Knowing what ducks out there are yours is probably a good first step before you start trying to train them into that row, because the row changes, the order changes, how many feathers each one has, it all
and whether they
changes.
walk around in circles or in a straight line.
Yeah, they've got 2 feet.
Oh, listen, it was absolutely lovely having you on the podcast today. Thank you very much for sharing your journey with us. Have you any final message, and also tell people where they can find you as well?
Okay, so you can find me on Instagram at bumps _and _Bainne. I'm also on Facebook under Bumps and Bainne, and you'll find my website is bumpsandbainne.ie. I suppose final words. Yeah, like if this is something that you really, really want, do it, and do it for yourself as much as you're doing it for anybody else. Like I would say, hand on heart, yeah, I'm doing this for my kids, but I'm doing it for myself, because I deserve to fill my cup up for me as well. I need to be able to drink from my cup as well as pour.
I love that. And I think that's a great way to finish. So thank you very much again for joining us, and for everyone listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and please do DM us on Instagram of any thoughts that you might have about the episode. We love hearing everything about how you're feeling. If you have any questions, you know where we are. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.